And we're back. Part two. Yes. So, and correction, I don't think the title, I really said the title correctly. It's The Homeliest Little Horse. Um, yes, getting back to what I was saying, Al and Darius are unimpressed when he explains this to them, and he decides he needs to go back to therapy. So the reason why it's also titled this way is because that was the title of the TSA agent, aka our Karen here, who profiled Ern and Van and Lottie. She had this like concept of it being the it was like this little horse, and that was the title of the picture book that she had created for children. And the way they were hyping her up, like, oh, you can be the next J.K. Rowling, according to this letter that she got from some random book agent. And although, which here's the irony, and this happens in a lot of cases too, these people who will racially profile people are, on low races, and then working in an environment like an airport, holding all the cards and making people feel vulnerable and crappy. She has a thing for her next door neighbor. I don't recall what he does. I think he may be a garbage man. I'm not sure, but he comes home, he disrobes, and right in front of like his like sliding doors in his living room, and you can see a bare chested next door neighbor, and she is like drooling. Not to mention that she's also listening to like I think it's like a 1990s R&B track in the background, and her on her laptop, as she's like checking her email and maybe getting ready for work. And that's when this really peculiar email drops in, and she calls out sick and goes. We also find out that her financial situation isn't all that great. She's asked friends for money, um, but yeah, she really wants this career to take off, and Ern catches wind of it because he could tell that she's a repeated offender of doing that, because there were other people chiming in like, oh, she does this all the time, there's nobody ever kind of calls her out on it, or she's never reprimanded. Now again, triggers are going off in Ern's head that he's like, he's just brought back to that time when he was an undergrad, or I think a graduate student, because he was working as an RA. And he had that situation. He trusted this person whom he thought was a friend, and could do him a solid of like just holding on to his suit. And for her to have acted like as almost like, I mean, words were being tossed around. And especially when it involves men of color, people of color, and you don't want to be tossed around with, sexual offender. Whatever the case was, he was put in that situation just because he used a master key. And it was just to literally get his suit out. He needed it for a job. But instead of understanding the circumstances, of course, he's the one that's blamed, and she was, excused. So I think the way this woman was persecuting him at the airport, he felt the need to go out of his way. Now that Ern is making that kind of buku dollars, we're not talking about the Ern from season one. We're talking about that he can hire a whole community theater, and he had children even booing her because she got all like decked out. He got a fake agent. He even got, I think, Al's Paperboy is one of his dear friends who didn't have much luck in the job department, even play a role as secretary. And there were instances that this could have been dubious, but until the end, when like, it seems like Ern's like, okay, he's getting into the vibe of not having to go to therapy and whatnot. He's like, I'm feeling better about myself. He's in the bar celebrating. He rented out the whole bar, showcasing images of this poor woman crying into her car, because she was so humiliated. They even had somebody, now I don't know if that was particularly a book agent, somebody who could, or publisher, and she crumbles because now the little paid actors, the children were like, boo, this sucks. And it looks like the horse is farting and she doesn't know how to interact, because that's not, she had this ideal, this romantic idea of what a book writer would look like or behave. But I'm telling you, there's no crueler reality when you're met with how children will react to the actual literature. So, I mean, just like, I guess, reviewers and fans of the show can pull apart your work. But she crumbles, and poor woman. And people are like, okay, she was kind of an asshole to you, but did you really have to go this far? And then he's like, I don't think I need therapy. And that again, brilliant work. Anyway, episode 3, Born to Die. Hoping to sign D'Angelo, Earn is set to dissociate, no, to a room in a building where he waits for several days, finally being granted access to D'Angelo through a secret hole. And again, with the holes in the mazes this season, the wall, after reaching an understanding. Inside, he meets a man who explains that D'Angelo is not a real person, but a group of people around the world facilitating his image. He helps Earn reach an understanding about a recurring dream he has. Earn does not sign him when he asks. Al is advised, this is a separate story arc, is advised by a group of rappers to look for young white talent and sign it, so he partners up with a rapper named Yodel Kid. Yodel Kid wins a Grammy, but overdoses and dies the day of the award show. Al admits to Earn that he did not enjoy managing and asks how he does it, and Earn tells him that he focuses on what leaves a legacy. Which, again, a lot of people get into this business too, kind of like the other episode, of romanticizing what they think it's going to be, what it's going to lead to. I was going to say AI. Al is introduced to these white rappers because he's at a bar mitzvah and these people have a lot of money, and the father of the young boy advises him, like, look, I'll pay you $1 million, just kind of mentor my kid. And he goes, he figures it's easy money, but then he's introduced to producers and they're like, let me pull you aside. And then they kind of break it down to them that, yeah, that your longevity in this career is only as relevant as your track or your latest album. But once it, goes on a sour note, or people start forgetting about you, the chances of you still remaining in the industry or having longevity is slim to none. And that's why we've also, perhaps there is a grain of truth, we have seen our gangsters of gangster rappers now, doing kiddie movies. Are we there yet? That type of comedic, movie watching. Hell, Snoop is on VH1 with Martha Stewart. So you have to look at other avenues so that you can still maintain and still make money. So he's like, what? I'm still hot, whatever. But they were like, and now it's so much more fleeting, because at least before you had a little bit of time to develop another album, but now it's just so immediate with the immediacy of internet. So and not for nothing, tell me that this hasn't happened. I mean, Diddy has signed a number of white acts to maintain that longevity. Usher, for heaven's sake, he signed Bieber. So this isn't so far-fetched, Is it always successful? Is the legacy worth it? That's the other thing. And so that's what I think Earn is kind of, battling here with this episode. But he finally realizes that it's not necessarily landing that big client, but rather something that will be of substance. So something to ponder, but again, inquisitive, really inquisitive for this episode. Um, the following episode 4, light skinned. While going to church, Ern and his aunt Jeannie are abandoned by his mother, who takes off with her father to get him away from Jeannie and spend time with him, believing that Ern is in on the plot. Jeannie follows him to Al's studio and forces them to stay with her as she argues with her siblings over the phone about the contempt for her. When she calls the police, a studio worker helps Al and Ern escape out the back. Ern's recently retired father goes to a mall, adhering to his tight schedule to avoid the post-church crowd, and gets distracted when a woman convinces him to buy a hat, leading him to get humiliated by a group of young men. And as the crowd arrives, the family meets up for dinner, where a hatless Relay becomes angry at a young waiter who refuses to package bread to go. And that's a breakout down in itself. His Aunt Jeannie is the lightest, fairest of them all, and so she feels that as if she's always been the one that's been the black sheep or the one that's pegged out. Um, you know, because her siblings are more of a darker tone, and that's why she was never taken seriously. There are some really great comedic jokes punched in here as siblings, and we have the return of Cat Williams, which again, if you haven't seen him in season 2, please do so. That is a hysterical episode. It's the first episode of that season, but they're like, girl, who do you think you are? And the reason why Ern's mom tries to kidnap her dad is because I think her dad is going through some a mental health decline, perhaps dementia. And Jeannie is like basically monopolizing his funds, his access to people, and they're worried about that circumstance. So she literally drives off with him and leaves Ern standing there like, now what do I tell my crazy ass aunt, And he calls his dad for help as some kind of like lifesaver or life raft, and he's like, look, I've had to deal with this crazy family for years. You can handle one Sunday. And he's left to his own devices with her. And yes, he has to go to the studio, but it wasn't because he had to go to the studio, really. And then I was like, now you bring us this crazy, okay. And she's calling the cops, the drama. At the end of the day, they resolve the situation. And yeah, I kind of feel bad for his pops, because he was swindled by a very convincing vendor to buy this hat, and the way he's harassed in this mall kind of tells you too, like how I don't know. Again, every generation is different, and maybe similar, maybe just how the timeline works sometimes in the evolution of a person's progression over years. But teens don't necessarily recognize older adults as somebody that they should respect. Not nearly. I don't want to generalize. I'm not saying all folks of this generation, but especially with the Instagram and how they went out of their way to really humiliate him, and almost as if he didn't do it, he was gonna, perhaps be harmed, and that really kind of traumatized his dad, which really kind of broke my heart, and that's why he kind of snapped later. That's why sometimes you just don't know what a person's going through. So, when they react that way, especially sometimes with people in the service industry, but it's unfortunate. Anyway, moving on. Work ethic. This is a gem. This was like, what? And it's one of those episodes that kind of throw you for a loop, because kind of like I think season 2, when we had that character that very much mimicked Michael Jackson. It's like, or season 3 when Al's lost in Europe, and he just goes through like these mazes of all the France, hitting all the social life, nightlife in France, and we're kind of like left like dumbfounded. That's one of these episodes. Van takes a one-time job as a sitcom actress in a studio run by the enigmatic unseen producer known as Mr. Chocolate. I'm sorry, Mr. Chocolate, aka Tyler Perry. Very that. But we don't know this until the very end. So she brings along Lottie, her daughter, who talks during one of the Vance's takes and catches Mr. Chocolate's attention. He hires and begins filming with her without Van's permission. Van starts to frantically search for her daughter as she is shuttled from lot to lot. An older female staff member helps her break into Mr. Chocolate's studio and confront him, where he explains that Van, having viewed her without contacts through his security cameras, could also be one of his characters, and she disparages his shows. He gives her back Lottie, but Van forces her to leave when she says that she wants to stay. Returning home, Van explains to Lottie that Mr. Chocolate shows exploit her race and that she needs to be above them for her own sake. And that is the sentiment expressed by a lot of people, not all, because Tyler Perry has a huge fan base, especially in the Christian faith, and that older woman is very much that of his hardcore fans. But yeah, the fact that work ethic, which they titled this episode, was synonymous with what Tyler Perry posted during the pandemic, that a lot of his shows, if not all, are written by him, not staff writers. So although you are pumping a lot of workout, is it really is it a double-edged sword? Is it coming at the cost of exploiting your own people and putting them in not a great light? I mean, for heaven's sake, one character is eating a crack sandwich? Like, what? And it's not so far-fetched from what we've seen in some of his films. Don't get me wrong, some of his films I do genuinely like, but some of them are like, like the last one with the bad wigs on Netflix. So, and then he has this hysterical scene at the end. Donald playing Earn or playing Mr. Chocolate, because sometimes a good portion of the time these strange characters are played by him, but he's under prosthetics, so you can't really even tell. But you can tell it's him. It's like a huskier version of Earn, but playing Mr. Chocolate. And there's a scene that mirrors what Medea tells, like one of his famous films from all that franchise. I think the Diary of a Mad Black Woman, and it's of an abused woman, and Medea advises her granddaughter, or her goddaughter, to be like, if you ever find yourself with a pot of grits, you throw it on them when they least expect it. And the same thing happens, because in his office it's kind of set up like a kitchen, and Van because she wants her daughter back, took that pot and threw it on him, and it was like, he's in agony, and then he's like, I've created or something, or there's some kind of mental power that he's kind of inflicted on himself so he won't feel the pain. And it's this most funniest of scenes you'll ever see. I'm telling you, you gotta watch this on Hulu. This show is crazy. And then towards the end, thankfully Van is able to escape, but he's like, then he tells his assistant, like, no, you're really gonna need to call 911. I'm bleeding. But brilliant, and a great nod to what has been happening in pop culture and how some folks see him. Anyway, moving on. Episode 6, Crank That Killer. No, is it Crank That Killer? A serial killer begins tracking down people who recorded videos of them